The sun rises late over Detroit in late September, 9:52. Warm light drapes across Woodward Avenue like honey, pooling on chrome bumpers and shop windows still wet from last night's rain. The air smells of fresh bread from bakeries that opened before dawn, motor oil rising from assembly lines already humming 3 miles away. And something sweeter, optimism maybe, or just the maple trees beginning to turn. A streetcar rattles north past the Fox Theater, its bell cutting cleanly through the morning's thick hum of voices, horns, and footsteps. 2 million people live here, 2 million hearts beating in synchrony with the rhythm of machines that never sleep. This is Motor City in full bloom, and the bloom feels eternal. Children spill from brick houses on tree-lined streets in neighborhoods with names like Brightmoor, Conant Gardens, and Fitzgerald. Mothers call from porches, fathers in pressed shirts head toward factory gates where shifts begin at 6. The plants are monstrous and magnificent. Highland Park, River Rouge, Dodge, Main, steel cathedrals stretching half a mile, their smokestacks writing scripture into Michigan sky. Inside, men in goggles bend steel and bolt engines. The noise is deafening, but it sounds like progress. Every Cadillac, every Packard, every Lincoln rolling off the line carries a piece of Detroit pride welded into its frame. The assembly lines move with mechanical perfection. A chassis arrives every 52 seconds. Workers have practiced their movements so many times they could do them blind. 12 bolts, torque wrench, move to the next station. The rhythm is hypnotic, exhausting, and strangely beautiful. These men came from everywhere. Kentucky coal towns, Alabama cotton fields, Polish villages, Mexican border cities, drawn by Henry Ford's $5 day and the promise that hard work would build a future. And for decades it did. A man could start on the line at 18, work 30 years, retire with a pension and a house paid off. His children would go to college, become teachers or engineers or doctors. This was the deal, the American Compact, and Detroit was where it was written in steel and sweat. Downtown, the sidewalks are crowded at lunch. Secretaries in heels and gloves stand in line at Hudson's department store. 13 floors of everything America could want. Furs, furniture, toys that wind up and dance. Executives smoke cigars beneath the marble columns of the Penobscot building, discussing quarterly reports and expansion plans. Street vendors sell papers shouting headlines about Eisenhower and Korea. Shoe-shine men work their brushes in quick circles, snapping rags like whips. The smell of hot dogs and roasted nuts drifts from carts on every corner. You can hear 6 languages in a single block: Polish, Arabic, Yiddish, Greek, Spanish, Italian, all blending into the particular music of a city that works. At night, the city doesn't dim, it ignites. Paradise Theater glows neon pink, its marquee announcing Count Basie this week, Nat King Cole next. The Flame Show bar on John R. pulses with jazz so thick you can taste it. Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, Miles Davis, they all pass through, and the music leaks from doorways, curling into the autumn air like smoke from 100 cigarettes. Young couples dance close, men in sharp suits, women in dresses that shimmer under colored lights. The bartenders work fast, hands moving in constant motion, pour, shake, slide the glass down the polished wood. In the back booths, union organizers talk strategy over whiskey. At the bar, auto workers fresh off the line drain beers and laugh too loud, high on exhaustion and the week's paycheck folded in their pockets. This is a city that works hard and celebrates harder, a city convinced it will never stop moving forward. The neighborhoods are worlds unto themselves, each with its own character, its own heartbeat. In Black Bottom, barbershops buzz with clippers and conversation, children jump rope on sidewalks, their rhymes echoing between buildings. Churches, Baptist, Methodist, Pentecostal, hold services that shake the walls, voices rising in gospel harmonies that pour out open windows and sanctify entire blocks. In Hamtramck, Polish is spoken more than English. The smell of pierogies and kielbasa drifts from kitchens. Women hang laundry on lines strung between houses, sheets snapping in the wind. In Mexican town, mariachi music plays from radios propped in windows. Men gather in corner stores, speaking Spanish and drinking Coca-Cola from glass bottles slick with condensation. Every neighborhood has its corner store, its church, its school. Kids walk to school in groups, passing the same houses every day, waving to the same people. Mrs. Kowalski waters her flowers. Mr. Johnson washes his Buick every Saturday morning, the hose spraying rainbows in the sunlight. The mail carrier knows everyone's name. The beat cop stops to talk, accepts coffee from shop owners, knows which kids are troublemakers and which are just bored. There's a fabric to life here, woven tight, every thread connected. But cities, like people, are fragile in ways they cannot see. The first cracks appear, quietly, almost politely. In 1953, Packard closes a plant. It's temporary, they say, just restructuring. A year later, Studebaker pulls out. Still, no one panics. Detroit has survived strikes and recessions before. The Rouge plant alone employs 100,000 men. General Motors is the largest corporation on earth. Surely that can't vanish. But something else is shifting. something beneath the surface, invisible as rust, forming inside a pipe. Families with means begin moving outward, to Grosse Pointe, to Birmingham, to subdivisions rising in open fields where cows grazed last summer. The highways Eisenhower funds make it easy. You can work downtown and sleep in a house with a lawn and a two-car garage. The American dream, they call it. But every family that leaves takes their taxes with them. Every storefront that closes takes a little more light. The city tries to adapt. Urban renewal projects promise modernization, but modernization means demolition. Black Bottom, that vibrant neighborhood of homes and businesses, is razed to make room for the Chrysler Freeway. Thousands of families are displaced, their homes reduced to rubble, their communities scattered. The freeway cuts through the city like a scar, efficient and cold. Paradise Valley, the entertainment district where Black Detroit came alive at night, is demolished for new development that never quite materializes. The clubs close. The musicians leave for Chicago, New York, Los Angeles. The jazz that made Detroit famous begins to fade, moving elsewhere, finding new homes. Then comes 1967, and the dream catches fire. It starts on a Sunday morning in July on 12th Street, after police raid an after-hours club celebrating the return of two Vietnam veterans. The crowd that gathers is angry, tired of being pushed. Within hours, that anger, over jobs lost, housing blocked, voices ignored, dignity denied, boils over. A brick goes through a window, then another. Fires start in trash cans, then storefronts, then whole buildings. Smoke rises in thick columns visible from 20 miles away. The looting spreads. Some take what they need, food, diapers, medicine. Others take what they want, televisions, liquor, clothing. The police are overwhelmed, then pull back entirely, letting whole neighborhoods burn rather than risk more confrontation. Governor Romney calls in the National Guard. President Johnson sends in the 82nd Airborne. Tanks roll down Woodward Avenue. Soldiers, many just back from Vietnam, crouch behind cars with rifles loaded, facing American citizens. Snipers fire from rooftops. Machine gun fire echoes through residential streets. Helicopter gunships circle overhead, spotlights sweeping the darkness. For 5 days, Detroit is a war zone. The smoke is so thick it blocks out the sun. Ash falls like snow. When the fires finally die, 43 people are dead. More than 7,000 arrested. Over 2,000 buildings destroyed. Whole blocks are gutted, reduced to blackened brick and twisted metal. The photographs go worldwide. Soldiers patrolling American streets, buildings burning, people running with arms full of stolen goods. The images cement something in the national consciousness. Detroit is dangerous, broken, unsalvageable. And though the embers cool, the wound remains open. Businesses don't rebuild. Insurance companies refuse coverage or charge rates so high it's pointless. White families accelerate their exodus. Not a trickle now, but a flood. Real estate agents practice blockbusting, telling white homeowners that black families are moving in and property values will collapse. Panic selling follows. Neighborhoods flip almost overnight. The tax base continues to erode. City services begin to fray. The factories, already weakening, begin to bleed jobs faster. The music keeps playing, but the crowds thin. Motown Records, which put Detroit on the map with a sound so distinctive the world knew it instantly, moves its headquarters to Los Angeles in 1972. Berry Gordy takes the Supremes, the Temptations, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye takes the whole dream west, leaving behind the Hitsville house on West Grand Boulevard, empty and silent. The departure feels symbolic, a surrender. If Motown can't survive here, what can? By the early 1970s, the collapse is undeniable. Chrysler is struggling, begging for government bailouts just to stay afloat. Ford shifts production to plants in the South and overseas, where labor is cheaper and unions weaker. The oil crisis of 1973 hits like a sledgehammer. Gas prices quadruple overnight. Americans stop buying the big, heavy cars Detroit builds, land yachts with V8 engines that drink fuel like water. Japanese imports flood the market. Toyotas, Hondas, Datsuns, small, efficient, reliable, cheap. Detroit's automakers, bloated and complacent after decades of dominance, can't compete. They've ignored quality control, dismissed innovation, underestimated the competition. The assembly lines slow, then stop. Layoffs come in waves. 1,000 workers this month, 5,000 next. Dodge Main, that massive complex in Hamtramck that once employed 35,000 men, shuts its gates in 1980. The silence is unbearable. Men who spent 30 years building engines stand in unemployment lines, disbelief hardening into bitterness. They thought the work would last forever. They thought loyalty meant something. Now they stand in union halls listening to speeches about retraining programs and early retirement packages. But the speeches sound hollow because everyone knows the truth. Those jobs aren't coming back. Their children leave for college in Ann Arbor or East Lansing and never return. Or they skip college entirely, heading south to Atlanta or Houston where economies are growing, where the future hasn't already happened and ended. The young people see no reason to stay. What's here for them? Empty factories and broken promises, neighborhoods that hummed with block parties and church bells fall eerily still. Porches sag under the weight of Michigan winters, paint peels exposing raw wood to the elements. Grass grows waist-high in driveways where Buicks used to shine every Sunday. Fences collapse. Roofs develop leaks that no one repairs. You can watch a neighborhood die in slow motion. First the little things go, the flowers, the fresh paint, the trimmed hedges. Then the big things, the occupied houses, the working streetlights, the sense that anyone's watching. The city begins to empty like water draining from a tub. Slow at first, then faster. Houses are abandoned first by choice, then by necessity. A family can't sell, can't afford repairs, finally just leaves, walking away from mortgages worth more than the property. The house sits empty. Within weeks, the scavengers come, stripping copper pipes, aluminum siding, anything with scrap value. Then the weather gets in. A broken window lets in rain, mold blooms on walls, ceilings collapse. Squatters move in, burn furniture for warmth, leave trash and needles scattered on floors. Fires start, sometimes accidental, sometimes arson, insurance fraud, or just boredom. The fire department, underfunded and overwhelmed, stops responding to every blaze. Some houses just burn until there's nothing left but chimneys standing like tombstones over ash-filled basements. Whole streets go dark, streetlights burn out, and the city has no money to replace them. Entire neighborhoods fall into darkness so complete you can see the Milky Way from intersections where you once couldn't see past the neon. In the east side, rows of brick colonials, built sturdy in the 1920s for auto workers who believed in permanence, stand hollow, windows empty, doors hanging from broken hinges. Vines crawl up facades, trees sprout from gutters. What was urban becomes something else, something between city and forest, a place where the categories blur. By 1990, the population has fallen below 1 million. Half the city is gone, but it's not a clean halving, neat and organized. Whole neighborhoods are abandoned while others remain occupied, creating a checkerboard of life and death. You can have one house with lights on, lawn mowed, flowers in the beds, and on either side, ruins. Collapsed roofs, broken windows, walls tagged with graffiti that no one bothers to clean because no one's looking anymore. The factories, those monuments to American might, stand like tombstones. Packard plant, once a gleaming showcase of industrial innovation, stretches for 35 acres along East Grand Boulevard. It was designed by Albert Kahn in 1903, the first building to use reinforced concrete in automotive manufacturing. For decades, Packard built luxury cars here, vehicles for presidents and movie stars, machines so well made they lasted 40 years. But Packard couldn't survive the 1950s. The plant closed in 1958. Now, 70 years later, it's a cathedral of decay. The windows are shattered, every single one, tens of thousands of panes reduced to glittering fragments on floors slick with rain. Floors have collapsed in sections, creating vast pits filled with rubble and rust. Graffiti crawls up concrete columns, tags, murals, messages left by explorers and vandals. Paint peels from walls in long strips that hang like dead skin. Pigeons nest in the rafters, their droppings layering everything white. Rain pours through collapsed roofs, pooling on floors where men once assembled engines by hand, where the air smelled of machine oil in progress. Now it smells of mildew and pigeon shit and wet concrete, the particular stink of abandonment. Vines push through cracks in the walls, thick as wrists, pulling bricks apart with slow, patient strength. Saplings sprout in stairwells, roots breaking through concrete. In summer, the upper floors are green with foliage, trees growing 40 feet above the ground, their branches reaching through empty window frames toward sunlight. Nature, patient and indifferent, begins its slow reclamation, turning the factory back into forest, erasing what took decades to build. But some people stay. Margaret Watkins is one of them. She's lived on Cardoni Street since 1961, in a pale yellow house with a chain-link fence and a garden she refuses to abandon. The house cost $12,000 then, a fortune for her and Thomas. But they were young and he had steady work at River Rouge, and the mortgage felt manageable, a price worth paying for a place to call their own. They raised 3 children here, Michael, Patricia, and James. The kids played kickball in the street until the streetlights came on. In summer, Thomas would set up the sprinkler, and the whole neighborhood's children would run through it, screaming with joy. Thomas worked at River Rouge for 41 years. He started in 1954, fresh out of high school, and worked the same job, body panel installation, until they let him go in 1995, 3 years before he could retire with full benefits. They gave him a handshake and a severance check that barely covered 6 months. He died 2 years later, heart attack in the backyard while mowing the lawn. Margaret found him face down in the grass, the mower still running, blades chewing air. Their 3 children left decades ago. Michael went to Atlanta for a job in banking, met a woman, never came back. Patricia moved to San Diego after college, became a teacher, sends cards at Christmas. James went to California too, Silicon Valley, works in tech, makes more money than his father ever dreamed of. They call on Sundays, beg her to leave, to come live with them, but she always says the same thing. This is my home. Now she's 79. The houses on either side of hers are empty. The one to the left burned 5 years ago in the middle of winter. Electrical fire, they said, though no one lived there, so who knows. The fire department came eventually, but the house was already gone, just blackened walls and a collapsed roof. The smell lingered for weeks. The other house just sits, door ajar, filled with trash and shadows. She doesn't go outside after dark. The streetlights don't work anymore, and she's heard things. Footsteps, voices, things she doesn't want to investigate. But in the mornings, she waters her tomatoes and her roses, pulling weeds with the same determination she's had all her life. Her garden is small but meticulously kept. Rows of tomatoes staked and tied, beans climbing poles, marigolds planted around the edges to keep the rabbits away. She listens to the radio while she cooks. Oldies station, Motown mostly. When My Girl comes on, she hums along, and for a moment, the house doesn't feel so empty. She remembers block parties, kids riding bikes until the fireflies came out, the hiss of sprinklers on summer evenings. She remembers when the bus ran every 15 minutes, when you could walk to the corner store without fear, when the future felt certain. Now the future is just her, alone, watering roses no one will see. A few miles north in Highland Park, there's a diner that still opens 5 days a week. It's called the Coney, though the sign lost its C years ago and no one bothered to fix it. Inside, the booths are cracked, red vinyl. The floor scuffed linoleum. The coffee always too weak, but somehow always perfect. The walls are covered with old photographs. The diner in the 60s, crowded with auto workers, every booth full. Now those booths sit empty most days, the photographs watching over ghosts. The owner, a man named Frank Delgado, is 63 and stubborn as a rusted bolt. His father opened the place in 1958, 6 months after arriving from Guadalajara. He served auto workers at shift change, made a decent living, sent Frank to college. But Frank came back, took over in 1987, right when everything started crumbling. He could have sold, could have moved to the suburbs, opened something in Troy or Bloomfield Hills where money still flows, but he stayed. Somebody's got to keep the lights on, he says, flipping eggs on a griddle scarred with decades of use. Most mornings he gets maybe 4 customers, regulars, old men mostly, who come for the eggs and the company more than the food. They sit in the same booth every time, second from the door, left side. They talk about the tigers, about the weather, about nothing important. They don't talk about what the city used to be. That hurts too much. Sometimes they sit in silence, just the sound of forks on plates and the coffee pot hissing on the burner. When they leave exact change on the table, always $1 tip, even though breakfast costs $5 and hasn't changed in 10 years. Frank wipes down the counter, stacks the chairs, locks the door. He drives home through streets empty as tundra, past houses crumbling like sandcastles, past lots overgrown with sumac and Queen Anne's lace. Sometimes he sees deer crossing Michigan Avenue, moving cautiously between potholes deep enough to swallow a tire. The first time he saw deer in the city, he thought he was hallucinating, exhaustion playing tricks. But they're real. Whole herds now, moving through the ruins like ghosts reclaiming ancestral land. By 2010, the population has fallen to 700,000. 70,000 structures sit abandoned. Houses, schools, churches, factories, stores. That's more than the entire housing stock of some cities, just sitting empty, rotting. Entire neighborhoods look like archaeological sites, ruins from a civilization that collapsed overnight. Streets still marked on maps lead to places that barely exist anymore. You can pull up GPS, follow the directions, and find yourself on a block with 2 houses standing among 30 empty lots, grass and trees erasing everything. The Michigan Central Station, once a Beaux-Arts masterpiece, stands gutted and hollow, its windows empty sockets staring across Roosevelt Park. It was designed by the same architects who did Grand Central Terminal, opened in 1913, a monument to the power and permanence of the railroad age. Its waiting room soared 18 stories, marble columns and vaulted ceilings, a space designed to inspire awe. Soldiers kissed their sweethearts goodbye here during World War II. Families arrived from the South, first glimpse of Detroit through those massive arched windows, thinking they'd found paradise. The last train left in 1988. Since then, the station has stood empty. Rain pours through holes in the roof. Trees grow from upper floors, roots breaking through marble, branches reaching through windows. The grand waiting room, where thousands once moved with purpose, is filled with debris and darkness and the droppings of 10,000 pigeons. Graffiti covers the walls, layers upon layers, tags and murals and messages that say things like, "We were here," and "Detroit lives." Assertions that sound more like prayers than facts. Photographers come from around the world to capture it, calling it ruin porn, turning decay into art. They climb fences, dodge security, risk arrest for the perfect shot. The images go viral online. hauntingly beautiful pictures of collapse, of nature reclaiming what man abandoned. But for the people who remember the station alive, humming with travelers and light, and the peculiar energy of departure and arrival, the photos feel like gravestones. They're documenting a death, not celebrating a life. The schools close one by one. Cass Technical High School, once a crown jewel of public education, survives, but dozens of others don't. Buildings that taught generations of children sit empty, their hallways silent, lockers rusting, chalkboards still showing lessons no one erased. In one school, someone left a calendar on the wall, stopped at October 2009, the month it closed. The pages haven't turned in 16 years. Playgrounds are swallowed by weeds, swing sets rust, chains frozen, basketball hoops bend under the weight of vines, nets long gone. In some schools, you can still find textbooks on shelves, papers in desks, art projects pinned to bulletin boards, a child's drawing of a house with smoke curling from the chimney, a family smiling in front. The child who drew it is 30 now, lives somewhere else, probably doesn't remember. In some neighborhoods, you can walk for blocks without seeing a single occupied house. The silence is profound. No lawnmowers, no dogs barking, no children laughing, no cars passing. Just one moving through broken windows, a low moan that never stops. The sound gets inside your head, fills the spaces where other sounds should be. You start to understand why people leave. It's not just economics. It's the loneliness, the feeling that the world has moved on and left you behind in a place that no longer exists. And yet, the wolves come. They're not native. No one's quite sure where they came from, maybe crossed over from Canada, following the Detroit River down, or maybe bred from escaped dogs gone feral over generations. But by 2015, there are confirmed reports. Wildlife biologists find tracks, scat, trail camera footage. Wolves moving through the edges of the city, through Palmer Park, through the old industrial zones where nothing stirs but rats and crows and the occasional deer. It's surreal, almost mythical, as if the land itself is returning to something older. Something before asphalt and engines and Edison's electric dreams. Margaret Watkins sees one from her kitchen window one morning in late autumn. She's standing at the sink, washing her breakfast dish, when movement catches her eye. It's early, mist still rising from the grass, everything soft and gray. The wolf is standing in the middle of Cardoni Street, perfectly still. It's big, bigger than any dog she's ever seen, gray and brown with pale eyes. She watches it for a long time, holding her breath, afraid it'll vanish if she moves. The wolf looks at her house, head tilted slightly, considering. Then it turns and trots away, muscles moving under fur, disappearing into an alley choked with wild grape and sumac. She tells no one. Who would she tell? But the image stays with her. The wolf's calm, its lack of hurry, the way it moved through the city as if it owned it now. And maybe it does. Maybe when humans leave, something else always moves in. Nature abhors a vacuum. The wolves are just filling space. Frank keeps the diner open, but some weeks he barely breaks even. The gas company threatens to cut service. The roof leaks in 3 places, stains spreading across the ceiling tiles like bruises. He patches it himself, climbs the ladder in the rain with a bucket of tar and a prayer, because hiring someone costs money he doesn't have. One morning in early spring, he opens the door and finds only one customer waiting, an old woman named Doris, who's been coming for 20 years. She's 91, walks with a cane, lives alone in a house 6 blocks away. She orders toast and tea, same as always. They don't talk much. She tells him it might rain later. He agrees. She mentions her grandson called from Arizona. He nods. When she finishes, she stands slowly, joints protesting, and touches his hand. Her skin is thin as paper, cool and dry. "Thank you for staying," she says. He watches her walk down the empty street, her coat too big, her steps careful on the broken sidewalk. She stops once to rest, leaning on her cane, then continues. He wonders how much longer she'll be able to make the walk. He wonders how much longer he can do this. Then he goes back inside and starts brewing another pot of coffee, even though no one else will come today. The city government, drowning in $18 billion of debt, can't maintain what's left. Streetlights go dark by the thousands. 40% of them don't work. Police response times stretch to an hour, sometimes longer. Whole precincts are shuttered. Officers patrol territories too large to cover, racing from call to call, always behind. Firefighters work with broken equipment and skeleton crews, stations closing, trucks aging past reliability. In some neighborhoods, people form their own security patrols, neighbors watching out for each other because no one else will. In 2013, Detroit declares bankruptcy, the largest municipal bankruptcy in American history. The news echoes around the world. Motor City, the birthplace of the middle class, the engine of the arsenal of democracy, is officially broken. Editorials are written, think pieces published, economists debate what went wrong. But bankruptcy is just paperwork. The real collapse is slower, quieter, written in the lives of people like Margaret and Frank and Doris. It's written in the empty swing sets, the boarded churches, the gas stations where pumps stand like sentinels over cracked concrete islands grown thick with ragweed. It's written in the neighborhood where a single house remains occupied on a block of 30, its lights burning defiantly every night. Inside lives a man named Curtis Williams, 74, who worked at Ford for 38 years. His wife died 6 years ago. His children want him to move in with them in Columbus, but he refuses. "I'm not leaving," he says. "They'll have to carry me out." Every morning he raises an American flag on a pole in his front yard. Every evening he takes it down, folds it properly, stores it inside. The ritual matters. It's an assertion, I'm still here. This place still matters. The factories, those cathedrals of labor, become playgrounds for the adventurous and the morbid. Urban explorers slip through gaps in fences, climb rusted fire escapes, walk through rooms where machines once roared. They photograph everything: peeling paint, collapsed ceilings, chains dangling from rafters like nooses, light falling through holes in roofs onto floors thick with debris. They wear masks against asbestos and mold. They watch for weak floors, for needles, for the homeless who sometimes shelter in the ruins. They post the images online with captions like "Haunting" and "America's Decline" and "The Death of the American Dream." The photos get thousands of likes, shares, comments. People in Tokyo and Berlin and Sydney marvel at the decay, at how thoroughly a place can be unmade, but the explorers don't linger. They take their pictures and leave before dark. Because even ruins have rules, and Detroit's ruins are not kind to strangers. People disappear in abandoned buildings, addicts, squatters, the mentally ill seeking shelter. Sometimes they're found, sometimes not. The buildings are too many, too vast, too far gone. Margaret's roses bloom every June, bright red against the gray monotony of her street. She cuts them and places them in a vase on the kitchen table, even though no one visits anymore. The mailman is kind, always waves, asks how she's doing. The grocery store is 4 miles away now. The corner market closed in 2003. She doesn't drive anymore, gave it up after a fender bender in 2018. Knew her reflexes weren't what they were, so a neighbor, a younger woman named Shanice, who lives 3 blocks over, takes her once a week. Shanice's house is one of the few that's kept up. Painted blue with white trim, flower boxes under the windows. She works 2 jobs, morning shift at a nursing home, evenings cleaning offices downtown, and raises her daughter Amaya alone. The father's not around, but she still finds time to check on Margaret, to drive her to the store, to shovel her walk in winter. "You remind me of my grandma," she says. Margaret smiles, grateful, but also sad. She knows what Shanice doesn't say, that staying here is an act of defiance, but also a kind of slow surrender. That every day she stays, she's choosing something she can't quite name, something between stubbornness and love. Winter is hardest. Snow falls heavy, covering the abandoned houses, the empty lots, the rusted cars that haven't moved in years. It makes everything look peaceful, almost beautiful, until the wind picks up and you see the bones beneath. Collapsed roofs, broken fences, foundations crumbling. Margaret keeps her heat low to save money, 62 degrees. Wears 2 sweaters and sleeps under 3 blankets. Sometimes the pipes freeze despite her best efforts. She calls the city, but they never come. So she waits for the thaw, for spring, for the roses. Frank closes the diner on a Tuesday in March 2019. No announcement, no final day ceremony, no last customer celebration. He just locks the door, turns off the lights, and drives home. The decision came suddenly, though he'd been thinking about it for years. The numbers don't work anymore. He's losing money every month, eating through savings built over decades. His wife wants to move to Arizona where their daughter lives, where it's warm and they can finally rest. He's tired. He's 73 years old. He's done enough. The next morning, he doesn't go back. The building sits empty, one more closed business in a city full of them. Doris comes by a week later, Tuesday morning like always, finds the door locked, the interior dark. She peers through the window, cupping her hands around her face, sees the tables and chairs, everything still there but abandoned. She stands there for a long time, purse clutched to her chest, breathing slow. Then she walks away, moving carefully down the broken sidewalk. She'll find another place, or she won't. Either way, something has ended. The diner never opens again. Within months, the windows are broken, graffiti appears on the walls. Someone pries open the back door and steals the appliances, grill, fryer, refrigerator. The booths are torn up, vinyl slashed, foam pulled out and scattered. It happens fast, the transition from closed business to ruin. The building joins the thousands. The city's population continues to fall. 670,000, then 640,000. Whole census tracts are nearly empty, populations in the double digits spread across square miles. The Detroit River, once choked with industrial runoff, its water thick with chemicals and oil, begins to clear. Regulations passed decades ago finally take effect now that the factories are gone. Fish return. Pike, bass, walleye. Eagles nest along the banks for the first time in half a century, building massive stick nests in dead trees, raising chicks in view of empty factories. Nature reclaims the margins first, then pushes inward. Pheasants roost in abandoned theaters, their calls echoing in spaces designed for human voices. Coyotes trot down Grand Boulevard at noon, unbothered by the occasional car. Foxes den under porches. Hawks hunt from streetlights. A black bear is spotted near Palmer Park in 2021, the first in over a century. It wanders through backyards, noses through garbage cans, then disappears into the woods that have grown where the old General Motors factory used to be. Wildlife biologists track it for 3 days before losing the signal. It's never seen again, but the sighting makes national news. A bear in Detroit. The symbolism is too perfect. The skyscrapers downtown, the Guardian building with its Art Deco lobby, the Renaissance Center rising like glass fortresses along the river, remain occupied, symbols of resilience and investment. Tech companies move in, lured by cheap real estate and tax breaks. Young professionals, mostly white, mostly from elsewhere, rent lofts in renovated buildings, coffee shops open, restaurants with exposed brick and Edison bulbs, boutiques selling artisanal goods. Developers talk about Detroit's comeback, pointing to these few carefully revitalized blocks as proof. And it's true, pockets of the city are coming back to life. But the comeback is small, concentrated, surrounded by miles of emptiness. The neighborhoods where Margaret and Curtis and people like them still live see no renaissance. No coffee shops open on Cardoni Street. No developers buy blocks of houses to renovate. The investment stops at certain boundaries, invisible but absolute as walls. The new Detroit rises in the footprint of the old downtown, and everywhere else continues to decay. Margaret dies in her sleep on a night in late November 2022. It's peaceful, they say, though no one was there to witness it. Shanice finds her 2 days later, after noticing the newspapers piling up on the porch still wrapped in plastic. She has a key, lets herself in, calls Margaret's name. The house is cold, heat turned low to save money. Margaret is in her bed, covers pulled up, looking like she's just sleeping. The roses have long since died in their vase on the kitchen table, petals brown and scattered. The funeral is small. Shanice, Amaya, a couple of neighbors Margaret had known for decades. A niece who flies in from Atlanta and leaves the next day, back to a life that has nothing to do with Detroit. They bury Margaret next to Thomas in Woodmere Cemetery, where rows of stones mark the lives of auto workers, shopkeepers, teachers, all the people who built Detroit and believed it would last forever. The grave is simple, just names and dates, no epitaph. What would it say? She stayed, she endured, she refused to leave. Her house sits empty now. The niece lists it for sale, but no one makes an offer. Why would they? The neighborhood is gone. The house needs work. There's no market. After 6 months, she stops paying the taxes. The city takes possession, adds it to the inventory of properties no one wants. It joins the 70,000. Within a year, the windows are broken. Vines crawl up the porch. The roses, untended, grow wild, then stop blooming. The house becomes what it was always going to become, another ruin, another piece of the city returning to earth. The wolves are seen more often now, bolder. In winter, their tracks cross through Palmer Park, through the empty streets of Brightmoor, through the lots where factories once stood. Trail cameras catch them at night, eyes glowing green in the infrared, mouths open, breath steaming. They're wary, elusive, but they're here. Some people fear them, tell stories of attacks that probably never happened. Others see them as a kind of justice, the land taking back what was always its own. Predators reclaiming territory lost a century ago when Detroit was built. Curtis Williams is one of the last. He's 78 now, still living alone on his block, still raising the flag every morning. His children have stopped asking him to leave. They know he won't. Every few months they visit, drive up from Columbus, spend a day or two, then leave again, back to lives Detroit isn't part of. They worry about him, his health, his safety, the isolation, but Curtis seems fine. He has his routines. He has his memories. He has this place, or what's left of it. He tells them about seeing a wolf once, early morning, standing at the end of his driveway. His children exchange glances, wondering if he's losing it. But Curtis insists. It was there, watching him, and then it left. He doesn't sound afraid. If anything, he sounds pleased, like he's witnessed something rare and beautiful, a secret the city keeps for those who stay. What remains when a city dies? Not the buildings, though they stand for a while, decaying monuments to ambition and miscalculation. Not the streets, though they still stretch in grids across the map, leading nowhere. Not the factories, though their shells endure, testaments to labor and sweat and the particular faith that hard work would be rewarded. What remains are the stories, fragile and fading, carried in the minds of the few who stayed and the many who left. The smell of fresh bread on Woodward Avenue at dawn, the sound of saxophones spilling from the flame show bar, curling into summer air, the feeling of a paycheck in your pocket, proof that your labor mattered, that you were building something that would last. Detroit was never just a city, it was a promise that work would be rewarded, that communities would endure, that progress was inevitable and good. The collapse of Detroit is the breaking of that promise, the revelation that nothing is permanent, that even the mightiest engines eventually seize and rust. 2 million people once called this place home. Now there are fewer than 640,000, and the number keeps falling. The houses crumble. The wolves prowl. The wind whispers through empty factories where the lathes and presses have long since been sold for scrap, leaving only echoes and the slow, patient work of nature erasing everything man made. But on certain mornings, when the light is just right, you can still see it, the ghost of what was. The sun rising over Woodward Avenue, glinting on chrome that isn't there. The hum of assembly lines that fell silent decades ago. The laughter of children playing on streets now swallowed by sumac and wildflowers. Memory is a kind of haunting, and Detroit is the most haunted place in America. It asks a question that no one wants to answer. What happens when the dream dies? What's left when the noise finally stops? When the promise breaks, who picks up the pieces? The answer, blowing through the ruins, is both terrible and true. Only the wind, and the wolves, and the long, patient work of forgetting. Only the people who stayed because leaving would have meant admitting something too painful to name. Only the flag Curtis raises every morning, flapping in the wind above an empty street. Only the roses that bloomed in Margaret's garden, their seeds scattered now, growing wild in places she never planted them, red petals opening each June whether anyone's there to see them or not. That's what remains, small acts of defiance, rituals repeated long after they've lost their meaning, the stubborn insistence that this place mattered, that the people who lived here mattered, that their lives and labor and love weren't wasted even if everything they built has turned to dust.